right versus right. And it just means that we've got a right answer that conflicts with another right answer. But before we go into how this applies in business, let's go on a mental journey for just a moment. Imagine, if you will, that we pick up 100 people from London in their cars, and we transport them magically to a no-name city in a no-name country. And at the same time, we go over to New York, and we pick up 100 people from New York in their cars and transport them to that same no-name city in that same no-name country and put them down the same place with those people from London, and we ask everybody to drive. What's going to happen? Well, I don't think it takes most of us very long to realize they drive on the left in London, we drive on the right in the U.S. We're going to have some crashes, some, big problems, some frustration, maybe even some hurt people, right? We got a big problem here. Now, that is just a right versus right, the perfect example, because there are people that successfully drive on the right and drive on the left all over this world. Now, we've got a lot of ways that we could fix this problem. We could set up 2 sets of roads, right? We could decide there's certain times that we could drive on the left or drive on the right on the road, or we could make a decision where we're either going to drive on the left or drive on the right. It doesn't matter what decision we make, the steps are the same. We need to surface what the problem is, in this case, the driving on the left and driving on the right, okay? We need to then make a decision on what we're going to do, and then we need to align the environment for it. Now, if someone were to say, we're going to now, from here on, drive on the left, I would be one of those people that would be a little unhappy about the decision because I'm pretty strong on my ability to drive on the right and not so strong on the other. And I would need training. I would hope that they would give me some extra help, like some signage, and maybe they would take the speed limits down on the roads for a little while I got accustomed to it. But I would also need a new car. It's the same thing with right versus right. Now, let's carry it into the business realm. That right versus right is just a constructive, workable way of addressing certain types of conflicts, especially culture clash. And let me tell you, culture clash, a lot of times that I hear it, it's used as an excuse. But we couldn't because we had culture clash. But now if you see it as right versus right, you can see that what we're facing is that type of a conflict, and there's now a technique that goes along with it. So it is a way of helping people to understand what's going on. Now, you can see some examples here. Let's look at the first one. It's best to ask customers what they want and respond to their requests, or is it best to be proactive and anticipate what the customers want and need? Okay? Now, that's a great example because we might choose one or the other depending on what our company is doing, what our service, what our products are, or we might choose a blend and then clarify when do I use this one and when do I use that one. So we might actually say, in most instances, we want people to be like Louise. We want them to be proactive and anticipate the needs of people like Starling, right? We might also say, however, when we're dealing with the service recovery and we're fixing a problem, it's not best to be proactive in those instances. It's best to ask them what they want and then respond to their request. This is an example. You can see also here who needs to be involved and what kind of latitude can employees have in making financial decisions. What do we do with customer loyalty, which is an example of a mindset? Here are just some examples, right? And there's a lot of different kinds of right versus right that we're challenged on in business. But let's take a look at one, and this is another polling question. I'd like Elisa to help us with this one. So here's the question. In general, or perhaps at your company, when it comes to making decisions, what do you think? Is choosing the best alternative most important, even if it takes a bit more time? Or is making a fast decision most important, even if you know it's only going to be about an 80% answer and needs to be tweaked along the way? What do you think?
Okay, and give us a second here while we pull this up. Okay, you should see it now. So go ahead and submit your vote. Oh, you guys are decisive this time. They're coming in fast. And it's neck and neck. We're going back and forth between the two of them. Maybe slightly higher than number 2. Okay, it looks like it's coming in now. So I'm going to go ahead and share that with you. And as you can see, number 2 is a little bit in the lead there.
Okay. Well, and I thanks, Lisa. Appreciate that.
Sure.
I chose this question very specifically because of a conversation with a client not real long ago where he was asking us for some help and saying, we are the fast decision even if, as a matter of fact, these were almost his words. You know, we'll make a decision even though we know it's an 80% answer. We'll tweak it along the way. And we just bought a company that will take whatever time it takes to make the perfect decision. And he said, this is the challenge that we're facing. So we're in the process of helping him with that. The perfect example of a right versus right, and I think the fact that we came out pretty close to even on the answer is an example of it being a right versus right. So if you were like that organization that is facing this challenge, it's very difficult to have people just automatically go for the other one. We need to work on both making the decision and then enabling it. So we'll talk more about that. So let's start to put some of these concepts into action. And I think service excellence requires a few things. But the first thing is to have that special service moment where you have the above and beyond, like the Louise and helping Charlie with the spoon, right? But we also have to have good, dependable service on a daily basis. Because even if I have that huge moment, if they know that I'm not going to be doing things on a great, on a daily basis, they're not going to be that impressed, right? And what if you don't have very good service recovery? You really do need to be able to recover because we're not all going to be perfect every time. All of us have to do all of these things. So let's talk about one organization that really was dissatisfied with its own performance. It was facing some challenges in being able to do things on a good, performing well on a regular daily basis. Okay, and here were the things that they told us when we first started working with them. Our decision-making process is too slow, and in some cases it was negatively impacting their customers. And they also said, we don't always handle our customer requests or requirements very well. Now, the other thing that they told us is, this is not the first time we've tried to address these problems. We have put things in place, and we keep coming back to the same issues. We can speed our decision-making up for a while, and then it starts to go backwards. And we just cannot seem to figure out how to handle our customer requests better. So what that told me is underlying some of these things were those deeply embedded mindsets. So we had some interesting challenges that we were going to face. So at a real high level, this is what we did, okay? So first of all, we went to understand what their business practices were. And this is a real trick that I wanted to share with you folks, because when some people start working with the idea of business practices, they can kind of sound like they're either good or bad, right? But they're neutral. They're neither good nor bad per se, but their impact might be. So in this instance, when we started exploring what was going on with their decision-making, what we found is it involved a lot of people, and therefore it was slow, right? So the fact that decision-making involves a lot of people is a neutral point, but they were concerned about the impact of it. So now it's become something that we need to work on for them to have good day-in, day-out service for their customers. We also found out that their workload, among other things, was assigned and handled first in, first out. The issue there was that wasn't always optimum for customers. Now, again, what they told us was, we've tried to deal with these things before. We've put in a new decision-making process. We've worked on the roles and responsibilities. We've had people try to rearrange the workload, and it hasn't fixed for us. So let's start now going and understanding why those things are sticking. Why is that business practice the thing that they keep coming back to? Well, so we started asking why questions. So tell us, in some cases asking why, in some cases asking, what do you get from having a lot of people involved, right? So similar kind of question. And what we found pretty quickly on decision-making is that the words were, you've got to minimize the risk. That's our top priority. Various different frames using those words, minimizing risk and top priority. And so I asked, where do those words come from? Because you folks seem to be using very similar words. They said, oh, it came from the previous leader. The leader who'd been gone now for a couple of years. But still, people had that same idea, and that was different than what their current leader had, but it was still embedded in their mindset, in the way that they were thinking that they needed to handle work. Now, in the workload one, it took us a little bit longer to really understand this one, but what we found was that they felt that efficiency was the most important thing, that they needed to have the lowest cost. Now, if we were to put some something in place and these mindsets were still there, they're going to continue to gravitate back toward those business practices that they were concerned about handling their customers and the slowness of the decision making. So we worked with them and said, not here are the new things to think, because that isn't a very good way to approach it, but rather, how is that working for you? Are there some alternate ways of viewing this? So in some cases, we weren't necessarily using the word mindset, because that's also kind of a high and lofty non-business term, right? But what's another way to view risk? And they said, well, hey, we need to accept some risk, especially when we have new products. Now we can start figuring out some alternate ways to go about doing things. So it wasn't to say that they were going to go and try to maximize their risk, right? That wasn't the case, but rather, hey, we do want to be careful about risk, but there's sometimes to accept it, right? So one way of combining, you can see there, right? So this is a way of using the right versus right technique. Then efficiency is most important, but wait a minute, customer satisfaction is actually more important than cost, because we can keep pushing down in our costs, but if our customers leave us because we don't handle them very well, that's actually a bigger problem, right? So in this instance, they actually said, wait a minute, we've got something that actually trumps the way that we've been thinking about it. Now, with that new way of thinking about things, they were able to say, now, let's think about business practices. They were able to say, wow, I can start seeing now that we can start differentiating decision-making by the type. And we'll only have broader involvement when we need it, when the type of decision we're trying to make necessitates it. And when it comes to customer satisfaction and handling things with our workload, let's do this. Let's assign people to specific customers. And then let them figure out, knowing what they know about the customers, to prioritize the workload for their very best benefit. Okay? So now we've got a different way of looking at things, how we want things to work here, those business practices, and then from there, that's obviously not the final step. That's just one step in the journey. Then the next thing is we have to figure out how to enable that, right? What are the roles and responsibilities? What are the process changes that need to be made? Do we need new measures? Do we need new incentives, et cetera? Okay? So that was what we did with this company, and it really did make a big difference. And they were able to make a lot of these things that they were trying to do stick a lot better. Now, they were overcoming some history, so it took them some time. But this was a very different kind of approach than what they tried before, and they were very pleased with it.